Hi, friends. We know that the mark of a true professional is revealed in their language. Hi, I'm Abby Vosek, real estate educator and source for inspiration. And I want to talk to you about architecture. And I'd actually like to share with you a preview, a little trailer of what you can expect from my architecture core 90-minute class. So let me just share my screen with you. We are talking about architecture, and the era of architecture we are in is the Neo-Eclectic era of architecture. We'll talk some about that. Let's test ourselves. Play with me for a moment because we're going to be looking at architectural elements and styles. So looking at this picture here, what can you identify right now, agents? Take a quick look. And let's see if any of this vocabulary that I'm about to share with you came up. Any roof lines, any siding material, some things that you're going to learn if you didn't already recognize that this is Neo-Tudor colonial architecture. It has a composite shingled hip and gabled roof. It has an arched eyebrow dormer with a fixed fanlight window. It has a soft arched portico with stone pier and wooden columns. Anytime I have a little porch that juts out over the door, supported by piers, that's a portico, right? Supported by columns. Random cut Texas sandstone veneer. We have two kinds of stone in Texas. We'll briefly talk about that. It's got hardy shingle siding on the front and side elevations, not hardy lap, but hardy shingle. It has a colonial 8-light double paned fixed windows. You can tell a lot by the style of windows. Windows and doors tell you a lot about the style of architecture. There's a red oak stained mahogany front door with full length side lights and transoms. So those are just a few words there that are common architectural elements and things that I want to be sure to load you up with that and so much more. Again, I'm giving you a taste of the class, some defining elements we'll talk about in architecture. There's always going to be form, right? There's always going to be methods of construction that you can use to define architecture. You can also talk about the building materials when you want to define architecture. We can also talk about the status and historical era, right? Like it's an updated or modernized, newly built. What is that status? And then talk about the historical era, mid-century modern, colonial, postmodern, antebellum, neo-eclectic. There's so many. And then we can always mention the regional character, right? It's got Southwest, it's Midwest, it's coastal, it's provincial, and it's country, right? These are different ways that we can begin to better define what we're looking at when we're talking about architecture. The things that this class focuses on are form, method of construction a little bit, and status and historical era. Now we can unpack all of this a bit more in my 3-hour CE continuing education class, but what I am really looking at right now are the highlights from the 90-minute core architecture class that I'm running on a regular basis through the Realtor Finishing School, Elevate Your Real Estate. Look at all these elements of architecture. Now, guys, there are certain things here that deteriorate quickly, and those are going to be things that you're going to want to be able to definitely have the correct vocabulary for when you're addressing the deferred maintenance and the repair that needs to be done, right? The fascia, the freeze board, the soffit, a lot of the things happening around the eaves and the edges are where we experience a lot of that deterioration. So we talk a little bit about that and some of the common forms that we're seeing pop up in this neo-eclectic era of architecture, like exposed trusses. We need to be able to identify what we're looking at there. We really unpack the eave in a lot more detail, looking at these different elements and the louver vents right there, just so that you don't lose your footing. That's always my idea when you're talking about architecture with your clients, because I know that anytime you open your mouth and you're talking about your product or the market that your product needs to compete in, we are either gaining or losing credibility based on our vocabulary. So let's be sure and know the different roofs. We'll talk about the 6 most common roofs and some of those roof combinations, because you've got gables and then you've got, of course, hipped roofs, but then we've got variations of those, like the cross gable, right? And instead of the pyramidal hipped, we've got this elongated hipped, and the cross-hipped. So there's a lot of variations on what's really popular right now. Roofs are getting more and more dynamic. We know that for sure. And we're seeing crazy things in this era of neo-eclectic architecture like this. Look, we've got what all can you recognize, guys? We've got a shed roof, a Dutch gamble roof. We've got a turret roof. Um, we've got another shed roof. I've got a hipped roof coming up there on the side. Wow. One of the biggest critiques of the neo-eclectic era of architecture is that it can get a little busy, right? A little busy, a little grandiose, a little ridiculous at times. But it's also a lot of fun. We're seeing things happening on the rooftops with different variations of dormers, right? Dormers are super hot. We're seeing these shed wall dormers. We're going to talk a lot about trending and dormers, because that's one way that we can update a home. We talk a little bit about the materials there, and when we talk about dormers, we start talking about things like clear story windows, big banks of dormers and trends that we're seeing there. Look at these gorgeous clear story windows, right? We can't talk about dormers without talking about windows. We can't talk about architecture without talking about windows, because windows are very definitive in defining the style of architecture. When I'm looking at it, I can see if we're swinging more colonial, more traditional, more farmhouse, more prairie, more craftsman. That can all be really influenced by the style of architecture and by the style of windows. Right. We'll kind of look at some common windows that I know you guys come across. We're always just refreshing, refining, expanding, cultivating that vocabulary, right? So then we move on to the awnings, shapes of awnings and different things that support awnings, right? Brackets and rafter tails, arches come into play, and then if how they configure on the outside in contemporary architecture. We see things like gabled pediments, right? And then architectural detailing like coining, very traditional things. We touch on some exterior selections, like what are we seeing right now on the exterior of a home? Look at all this different texture happening on the outside of the home. Look at that. We've got some hardy shakes, not shingles, they're shakes because they're a little less organized. Look at that Galvalume metal roof right there. That's a big builder upgrade. We've got some quarry cut limestone sunflower blend limestone. Look at all of this rough sawn stained on the exterior. We talk a lot about rough sawn cedar in Texas, and getting all of that stained one color, right? We talk a little bit about the paint formula and how to pick those colors out. We step on into the inside and talk about architectural details on the inside. And I know we try and pack a lot in these 90 minutes, but it is like drinking from a fire hose, but it's a lot of fun. We look at how wall panels are really trending. So from wainscoting to full sized wall panels, right? Coffered ceilings, tray ceilings, of course, and nothing better than a beautiful cathedral ceiling, and defining the difference between just a vaulted ceiling and a vaulted cathedral ceiling. And of course, identifying one of the major trends of putting hollow rustic beams up top. Then we start moving away from materials, don't we? And we spend the last half hour really defining neo-eclectic architectural styles and the blending of the styles that we're seeing, right? So neo-eclectic architecture is a blend of colonial architecture with a modern twist, right? And we see more layers of monochromatic contrasting texture. That's really what we see. So notice there's not a lot of different colors here, but we've got a lot of different textures, from brick to plank to composite pillars and black steel, and just beautiful things happening. So I'm going to give you a quick little preview of some of the phrases that you will be updating your language with in the 90-minute core architecture class. We are looking at neo-eclectic architecture, and this right here would be neo-modern Mediterranean. Okay, I'm going to throw a few of these at you. We do a lot more in class, but we cultivate sentences like, we learn to cultivate sentences like, it's a postmodern Spanish colonial revival. It's an immaculate Mediterranean condo. It's a modern craftsman bungalow. It's a newly constructed Dutch colonial farmhouse. It's a remodeled California ranch style. It's an updated a Tuscan two-story, or it's reminiscent of a provincial French cottage. Remember, provincial is another way to talk about countryside. It's a complementary, I mean, it's a contemporary split level. So these are some fun ways that we can, and notice I'm weaving the current build, like it's a postmodern, it's immaculate, it's updated, something about the current build status with either a style and or an era of architecture, right? So the style might be Spanish, and then I'm referencing the colonial era. So it's a colonial revival, Spanish postmodern. It's so much fun when you have more to work with, guys. So just a quick slide to see some phrases that I want you to start adopting: neo-eclectic, neo-traditional, neo-colonial, provincial, modern vernacular, Dutch modern farmhouse. Let's look at farmhouse. There's a few different ways that we can rephrase farmhouse because we're saying it so much. It can be a Dutch modern farmhouse. It can be a colonial modern farmhouse. It can be industrial farmhouse, traditional farmhouse, contemporary farmhouse, country farmhouse, right? So there's a lot of different ways, and there's more that we can play with that. We can talk about 21st century modern and modern minimalism, right? We can talk about smart home automation systems and smart home technology. We can talk about the styled ranch. That's something we need to talk about. The rambler, because it's so common, and the evolution of the ranch. To understand that is a little bit helpful when we start getting into suburbia. And then, of course, around here, we got to talk about the Texas Tuscan, right? A little neo-modern Mediterranean. And remember, I'm using words like it's influenced with, it's reminiscent of. It's a beautiful blend of both provincial French and American craftsmen. You know, things like that is where your vocabulary begins to just be a lot more revealing of both your knowledge and your a better reflection of the level of professionalism that I know that you're bringing to the table, right? It's just a better reflection of that, right? You know your product. Here, let's look at some slides real quickly, and then we're going to wrap this little preview up. Modern vernacular architecture. I'm going to do like slides and show you. These are words that you can use when you see something like this. This is Neo-Eclectic Colonial architecture, or I could call it a contemporary Tudor McMansion. Provincial neo-Tudor McMansion. Look at those. And we'll talk about what makes it Tudor and what makes it French and what makes it Spanish in class. Okay. This is a modern colonial English farmhouse. Pretty cool. Contemporary Tudor bungalow. A neo-craftsman English country home. Look at all those exposed rafters. We're kind of seeing some craftsman elements here for sure. The prairie style windows. Yeah, the exposed rafters. The stone piers, the deep set porch, but then we're also seeing these high pitched front gabled roof lines, right? With these louvered vents and windows and window boxes and carriage style garages. So it's this, we see the blend, right? The blend. Here's a country style home with a bonnet wraparound porch, little Victorian carving on the pillars there. Very French, I mean, very country, not French, very country, American country. Here's Dutch modern farmhouse with that just iconic Dutch gambrel roof line, that Barnetecture roof line, right? Here it is again, getting wild, this neo-Dutch eclectic style home, right? And then we might look at something more Victorian. This is going to look telling, right? Here's a Victorian Second Empire getting that mansard roof, that very kind of French mansard roof. We can also get a high-pitched hipped roof as a French roof line right there, colonial French with those little plank shutters. Look at those segmental arched little dormers on top. So again, dormers and window shapes and styles begin to tell you what you're looking at, right? The little pieces and parts. Here's colonial federal, right? Let's look how colonial classical revival right here. You start getting classical when you've got that. So now look at it play out in contemporary architecture. This isn't a true revival, but a little spin-off of that neoclassical colonial farmhouse. It's a farmhouse color palette on what feels very much like a Georgian, right? Here's the contemporary neo-traditional farmhouse with that just iconic board and batten siding, raised seam metal roof. Here we go, neo-eclectic farmhouse, but a little craftsman feeling, right? With the exposed truss and the stone piers. Kind of interesting, the blend. Here's a true craftsman bungalow. Uh-huh. But here's more of like a Tudor craftsman eclectic, right? It's so much fun. Tudor craftsman eclectic, and we can debate about this and talk about this. It really is this incredible blending happening right now. So it is a discussion what you're looking at. But when we have more vocabulary, we can add more to the conversation, right? We sure can. We can let's look at a few more split level, and the way split level is revolutionizing and evolving, right? It's all evolving. Here we go with the neo-modern Mediterranean. You always can identify Mediterranean with these big towers and modern flat rooftops. Here's a tower with a pyramidal hipped, very Italian reference, and especially with the wooden pergola over the garage. So we've got ourselves a little contemporary Italian bungalow. How do I know it's a bungalow? It's 1.5 stories, right? These are things we need to know. Tuscan, eclectic. This is the Texas Tuscan right here, right? And again, with a quarry cut, sort of limestone blend, sunflower blend of limestone. Mhm. And then, of course, we talk a little bit about the evolution of the ranch. I mentioned that into today's Rambler Ranch. Here's a throwback to that mid-century modern beginnings, but in today's a very much more modern eclectic style. And let's watch it evolve here with a modern ranch bungalow, kind of modern ranch farmhouse bungalow. Here's a modern minimalist. Yeah, modern often has flat roofs and some other elements that we can talk about more in class. 21st century modern with smart home capabilities, right? So we want to be able to talk about these things. And of course, I always like to keep it fun. We'll have a little game at the end and quiz you to make sure that you can indeed identify these if you want to take a look real fast. Look at that. What is A? What is A? Uh-huh, uh-huh. It's one of these. What is B? Uh-huh. I'm not going to tell you. You got to come to class. What is C? All right. All right. So if this looks like something that you would like to explore more, then you need to head over to elevateyourrealestate.org and sign up online. You're looking for the 90-minute architecture class. It's one of 3 core classes that we offer at the Finishing School for Agents. We like to teach you about your product, how to prepare your product, and how to really represent your product. That's architecture, home staging, and listing language. So sign up for it, guys, and I hope to see you in there. And until I see you next time, elevate your real estate. Bye.